Shalom and welcome back, everybody. So what you are about to see is a compilation of a few string of videos, okay? Now, I'm telling you this up front so that you're not a bit confused. Now, what you're seeing is a video I put out, which is kind of a reaction video to some other apologists and watching how they were communicating, and, you know, someone asked a question. And then I had a viewer that was like, wait, I'm not understanding what's going on. What's your issue? And so I really felt like it's necessary to really dive into this deeper. And I wanted you to see the thought process behind it, okay? At the very end of the video is where the apologetic comes in for Psalm 22, right? However, I wanted you to see all the thought process that goes into creating an apologetic, right? Understanding the other person's point of view, steel manning it, and making sure that you're well understood. And if you're not, how you could do better, or in general, how someone else could do better to understand you. So guys, a lot of communication is miscommunication when it comes to portraying your ideas to a person who may not agree with you.
In this specific psalm,
when the New Testament tells you that a psalm is about Jesus,
I'm talking about would you be able to explain without the New Testament?
Why would I? Without the New Testament, I wouldn't know Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament.
Well, we know what messianic prophecies are, right? So
I'll repeat it again. Without the New Testament, I would have no idea that Jesus is the focus of the Old Testament. So what kind of stupid argument is this?
Argument you obviously can't answer. I mean, I know your IQ might not be the highest, but it's okay.
Yeah, without the New Testament, prove to me Jesus is the Messiah of the Old Testament. Without the New Testament, Einstein.
Well, that wouldn't be the point, retard.
No, that is the
point would be me proving to you.
The point is Jesus.
Shh. The point will be The point will be proving to you that a Messiah is coming in the Tanakh. So all I'm asking you to do is to prove that this is a messianic prophecy. I'm not asking you to.
Try this again. Without the New Testament,
it was fun. And I'm going to ignore all this else right now. I'll clap back at him a little later. So with the Tanakh, there are messianic prophecies, correct?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Like, even if the New Testament, without the New Testament, there are still messianic prophecies in the Tanakh, correct?
Sure, yes.
Okay. So the reason I brought up Jews, not to ask him about Jews, I don't care what he thinks about Jews at all. The reason I asked him that is because you don't need the New Testament to prove that something is about the Messiah. You use the New Testament to confirm who the Messiah is and go back to the Tanakh to prove that that's how it happened. So I asked him to prove that this was about a Messiah. Prove that this was a messianic prophecy. That was my question to him, though.
That was bad. That was the ad hominem attacks from people who are supposed to be Christ-like believers. Bryson ended up leaving. Like, he was just like, I'm out, right? But he played his role, okay? So for those who are non-believers that see this, please understand we're not all like that. So let me first say that I apologize on behalf of my own people. So Bryson's point, I do agree with. Let's check it out. It says, and this is just a rough what I wrote down. So Bryson's point is that you would need to be able to validate that the ideas found in the New Testament are validated in the Old Testament, right? He's saying before the New Testament came along, there was a belief that a Messiah would come. So the New Testament, as I've always said, is nothing other than validation that the one the Old Testament spoke about has come. That's it. Nothing new. And it's not like, oh, it's a new revelation. It's not. It's literally just testifying to the one that has come, that he's come. That's it. Which is why at the back of my videos, I always put John 1:45, right? We have found the one that the law and the prophets spoke about. And this is him. So now let's write about him. That's what this is. This is not anything new, right? And so this is why Jews have this running like a joke, okay? And if you're a Mormon, don't come at me. This is what they say. I'm relaying the message here. And the joke is this: why did God invent Mormons? So Christians would know how Jews feel. And if you don't understand the joke, it probably is because you don't understand how Jews feel. What do they feel? They feel like Christianity is this totally different religion, this totally different book, and it's making a bunch of stuff up and yada, 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 and it's antithetical to our religion and our book and yada, yada, yada. And the reason why this is so is because a lot of Christians do exactly what Sam did, which is, well, it's about Jesus because the New Testament says it's about Jesus. Without the New Testament, I wouldn't know it's about Jesus. Yet you expect Jews to believe in Jesus when you can't prove to a Jew that their text was always about Jesus, and that you really don't need the New Testament to prove that you need Jesus. I get it. This is why I created my channel. This is where I think Christian apologetics has fallen flat on its face. So I've had a conversation with Messianic Jew, Dr. Michael Brown. He is a biblical scholar. And in this conversation, I asked him, how does he feel about my apologetic with regard to Isaiah 7? Because I feel like, and this is not me patting myself on the back, but I feel like this is a great example to express what it is that I feel like, right? I feel like I've done probably, in the at least modern apologetic world here, done the best job at explaining to non-believers, people that know nothing about the New Testament or Jesus or believe in him at all. I've done the best job at explaining how Isaiah 7 can be about Jesus in verse 14, 15, 16, verse 14. Okay, that's the main one. While simultaneously keeping the rest of the chapter in its historical context, which Jews are paying attention to. They're like, how is this about Jesus if it's about a civil war? This makes no sense. Jesus wasn't born for 700 years. And if our answer is, it's about Jesus just because the New Testament says it's about Jesus, what? That's not an answer. I get why Jews have a problem. I get it. I genuinely understand, which is why I created my channel. This is why my apologetics is different, right? I don't just say because the Holy Spirit said so. I don't just say because the New Testament says so. I look at the passage and I'm like, why does the New Testament find this to be messianic? And then I start looking and I start scouring the scriptures for other passages that also mention the same thing from a different author or from a different part of the same author, right? And this is why I believe the Bible is more univocal than maybe some critical scholars may believe. And that's fine. That's a totally different subject, but I have to just throw that out there. I think it's important that we acknowledge that saying those things isn't sufficient, okay? And it's only sufficient to someone who already believes in Jesus, not to a non-believer. And Bryson, unfortunately, full disclosure, okay, Bryson didn't figure this out on his own. He had help from Mr. Singer. Bryson interviewed Mr. Singer. So there's that. So it's not like he figured it out on his own. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you for sticking around. And if you're interested in a Christian, messianic, Jewish-like apologetic for why it is that I believe the New Testament is right when it quotes a passage and says it's about Jesus, then please head over to this channel. 27 tells us that this is how the Lord will contend with Israel, that he will scatter her and cause wars and assimilation, essentially. Isaiah 27 also speaks of this thing called...
Here is a follow-up video clarifying how Sam and Bryson were talking past each other and why knowing what the other means by their question is key to steel manning and proper responses.
Hi, so I'm going to make one final video clarifying the position here, and hopefully if Bryson has anything to say, he can step in. But Bryson's point was not that you can't prove that it's about the person whose name is Jesus, but rather he asked Sam to show him how the passage in and of itself was messianic. Without even identifying who that Messiah is, just prove to me that it's messianic, so that then I will know to look for a Messiah that would do these things that Psalm 22 mentions. Let me show you. All right, so here at the very beginning of the video, Bryson mentions Psalm 22. I know you don't get the whole context there, but I've already said it numerous times, what they were discussing. So listen very carefully.
In this specific psalm.
In this specific psalm. Psalm 22 is what they're talking about. I know the original video did not have that, but I've since clarified. They are talking about Psalm 22. Bryson said, prove to me that Psalm 22 is about a Messiah, right? That's his intent. And I believe Sam misunderstood what he was saying. This is why Sam said,
New Testament tells you that a psalm's about Jesus.
Notice, he said,
the New Testament tells you about that a psalm is about Jesus, then listen carefully to what Bryson said.
I'm talking about like,
He said, I'm talking about like, and then he didn't get a chance to finish his statement to clarify, and Sam cut him off.
like, would you be able to explain without the New Testament?
Why?
So would you be able to explain, without the New Testament, that Psalm 22 is messianic? Meaning, is there anything in the initial psalm, i.e. Psalm 22, that gives off the connotation that this may have some messianic inferences, like you find with Isaiah 11, right? Isaiah 11 doesn't identify the name of the Messiah, but we can gather that it's about a Mashiach, right? So Bryson was saying, hey, show me the parts in Psalm 22 that may give way to the understanding that a Messiah would fulfill this. Not that his name would be Bar Kokhba, which is one that in the past they believed was Messiah. Not that his name would be Jesus or the Rebbe. He's saying, show me what is in the passage that gives way to the understanding that this might be fulfilled by a Messiah, okay? And then Sam, again, didn't understand, I suppose.
Without the New Testament, I wouldn't know Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament.
See what he said? Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. They are talking past each other. They are not explaining. This is why my comment came up and said, I can do that. I can show you that Psalm 22 is a messianic chapter or has messianic inferences. Not that that the Messiah's name would be Jesus. I didn't say I would prove that. I said I would prove that it has messianic inferences. All right, continuing forward.
We know what messianic prophecies are.
Okay, so then he clarifies. He sees that there's a misunderstanding here. Bryson is continuing to try and make a clarifying statement. No, we know that the Old Testament contains messianic passages. He did not say, we know that the Old Testament contains passages about Jesus. No, he said messianic passages, right?
So repeat it again. Without the New Testament, I would have no idea that Jesus is the focus of the Old Testament. So
okay, fair enough. Fair enough, Sam. I have no problem with what Sam said. But that is not what Bryson was saying. Bryson was trying to say, show me how it's messianic, not prove to me that Jesus fulfilled it. Because, again, that was not the focal point of the chapter when they were discussing it, right? Sam misunderstood. I'm not coming at Sam here. I'm not coming at Bryson, other than to say I think the behavior was out of pocket. But nonetheless, that's not the point for the apologetic that I'm making.
what kind of stupid argument is this?
Argument you obviously can't answer. I mean, I know you're arguing.
So this is where it's out of pocket.
But it's okay.
Yeah, without the New Testament, prove to me Jesus is the Messiah of the Old Testament. Without the New Testament.
Okay, so this is not the same point. Without the New Testament, he then gave an identifying name for the Messiah. Prove to me that Jesus is the Messiah. You would need the New Testament to identify the Messiah, but you don't need the New Testament to identify messianic passages that then give you the character traits and the jobs of the Messiah that you would then look for, and then later go, it's Jesus. So again, they're talking past each other. That's the point of my video.
Einstein?
Well, that wouldn't be the point, retard.
Okay, notice Bryson then makes a clarifying statement. Well, that wouldn't be the point. And then he said something out of pocket. So the point that he keeps trying to make, that's not the point. The point is not to prove that it's Jesus, but that it's messianic. Now listen.
The point would be me proving to you.
The point is Jesus.
The point would be
Out of pocket.
proving to you that a Messiah is coming.
So the point would be proven that a Messiah is coming, is what he's saying. He's saying, please show me how 22 is about a Messiah.
In the Tanakh. So all I'm asking you to do is to prove that this is a messianic prophecy. I'm not asking
Yep, there it is. So he made a very clarifying statement. Sam still didn't understand, and that's okay. These things happen. But now that it's understood, we should be able to do that as believers in Christ, right?
It was, and I'm going to ignore all this else right now. I'll come back at it a little later. So, with the Tanakh, there are messianic prophecies, correct?
Yes.
Correct. Is that correct? Correct. But even if the New Testament, without the New Testament, there are still messianic prophecies in the Tanakh, correct?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So the reason I brought up Jews, not to ask him about Jews, I don't care what he thinks about Jews at all. The reason I asked him that is because you don't need the New Testament to prove that something is about the Messiah.
Notice what he said. Notice you don't need the New Testament to prove that something is about the Messiah. He didn't say Jesus. He said the Messiah. Now you are relating the word Jesus to Messiah because you believe that he's the Messiah. I get that. There's a breakdown in communication here. The reason why I understood what Bryson was saying is because I do Messianic Jewish apologetics and I debate Jews, right? So I'm understanding what he's saying. And I think Sam would, if maybe Sam would hear a clarifying statement. I don't know, whatever. I can't speak for him, but I absolutely can understand what Bryson's saying, right? And this is why I wrote up here, and this, what he just said, this is how you prove Jesus, meaning as the Messiah, without using the New Testament. But then that the New Testament confirms his, i.e. Jesus's identity. Bryson is 100% on point here. He's making this statement, and I believe Bryson didn't just like figure this out on his own. Bryson's had help, and this is why I mentioned that in the back of the video, by Mr. Singer.
To confirm who the Messiah is,
See?
Go back to the Tanakh to prove that that's how it happened.
See, he says you use the New Testament to confirm the identity of the Messiah, meaning his name, who he is, and then you go back to the Old Testament to confirm that that's how it happened, right? You're going to go back to the Old Testament and say, oh, it does say this. Okay, so this is exactly how it happened. Oh, he's right. It's on point. In the same way that you would test a prophet, right? You would go back to the passages that the prophet is maybe making relation to, like, hey, this is what this is about, or whatever. You're not going to just believe a prophet just because he performs miracles or signs or whatever. You have to test it, right? Okay, so that's Bryson's point, and that was my point.
Ask him to prove that this was about a Messiah. Prove it.
A Messiah. He didn't say prove this was Jesus. He said prove this was about a Messiah. Do you see the breakdown in communication? And it happens, guys. That's why I made this video. This video is really not about anything other than understanding how to properly communicate with the person that you're debating.
It's a messianic prophecy. That was my question to him, though.
Okay, so I hope that kind of helps with like a little bit of commentary there. This video is probably going to take literally all day to upload because I'm showing my screen and it's a long video and normally that takes all day. But whenever it finally uploads, let me know what you think. And hopefully you'll understand then why I made the video. I didn't make the video. I'm not upset with Sam. I mean, other than the fact that both of them were out of pocket. I do believe that and I'm going to stand by that. Which Sam's kind of known to be controversial like that. So Bryson, like, hey man, if you're going to watch this, like, just be above reproach. You know what I'm saying? Like, try your best. I get it. It's hard. Maybe one or two little slides, like digs, not a big deal over a 3-hour debate. But every few minutes, popping back off, clapping back. As a believer to a believer, let's try and avoid that if we can, right? And I know what it's like. I have a debate with a Jew. He yelled at me for 3.5 hours out of the 4 hours. So trust me when I say I completely understand how that can be very difficult to withstand the verbiage and yet continue to stay focused. But there it is, guys. There's my commentary. I hope it helps to explain why whenever you come to the table to debate someone, you need to understand their point as good as you understand your own. And this is what you call steel manning the opponent. So you need to understand what it is that they're saying to fathom how you can beat their argument in apologetics. Until next time. Great question. Glad you asked. Hold on, because it's about to get real scholarly up in here. So to kind of understand how this passage is messianic, you would need to understand a little bit of the history of the demonic forces, and you would understand Mount Hermon and the reason why Caesarea Philippi is mentioned in the New Testament with Yeshua and his disciples. Furthermore, to understand a little bit more about these bulls of Bashan and things that are mentioned in Psalm 22 and how this is messianic, you would need to understand a little bit more about Psalm 68. So we're going to dive into that now. So in Psalm 22, you have the statement, right? Many bulls surround me. It says strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. So what are those bulls? Who are they? And what does the Tanakh have to say about this? Okay, so we're going to check out Psalm 68, verse 15 through 18. Mount Bashan, majestic mountain, Mount Bashan, rugged mountain. Why gaze in envy, you rugged mountain, at the mountains where God chooses to reign? I want you to focus on that. Where the Lord himself will dwell forever. Okay? The chariots of God are tens of thousands and thousands of thousands. The Lord has come from Sinai into his sanctuary. When you ascended on high, you took many captives. You received gifts from or from people, even from the rebellious, that you, Lord God, might dwell there. Full stop. Let's think about this.
We're going to head over to Ephesians 4. I want you to pay attention to this. There is one body and one spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Right? Here it comes. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ appointed it. This is why it says, here's Psalm 68 being quoted, when he, who is the he, ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. What does he ascended mean, except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who has descended is the very one who ascends higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. And then he goes on to say, so Christ himself gave apostles, etc., so on and so forth.
Why in Psalm 68 is God himself speaking to this mountain? And by the way, this mountain is the mountain where the angels descended, right? The rebellious angels that descended. Notice what is happening here. God is staking his flag, right? This is my mountain, my territory. And why would he do that? So why is God using in Psalm 68 the same type of verbiage that is used in Psalm 82, where God is rising, right? This is like God is finally standing up to exert his authority. And if you're not familiar with the background of Psalm 82, God is judging amongst the unrighteous angels who control the 70 nations. And now I know this is not something that mainstream Judaism teaches, but we're going to get there. This is why they didn't understand. So we're back to the point where Christ literally is declaring war on these powers. As Christ makes the statement, on this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. And at this point, Christ gives over the keys to the heavens, right? Key to heaven. Whatever you bind here on earth will be bound in heaven. And he tells them clearly, do not tell anyone that I'm the Messiah. So anybody that says it wasn't plain, he told his people that it was plain. It was just at a certain point in time. So continuing in Ephesians 4, knowing that it is a quotation from Psalm 68, which if you continue to read, it says, our God is a God who saves. From the sovereign Lord comes escape from death, right? Okay, great. Surely God will crush the heads of his enemies, the hairy crowns of those who go on in their sins. Notice how God's enemies are seemingly represented by these demonic entities that are behind the people. Now, where else do we find this in the Hebrew Bible? Let's look. So here we are in Ezekiel 28. Notice what this says, okay? The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning the king of Tyre. The king of Tyre. This is a human. And say to him, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You, who's the you? King of Tyre. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the Garden of Eden. Every precious stone adorned you. Like, hold on. A human, a mere human in the Garden of Eden? All right, so now we're in Isaiah 14. We're talking to the king of Babylon. And now we're going to go here where it says, how you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to earth. You who were once laid low. You who once laid low the nations, You have said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly. That's important. On the utmost heights of Mount Zephon. So there's different ways to render the back half of that verse. But what I want you to note is God speaks to these mountains or these mountains of assembly or these humans as if they are some sort of divine figure that was there in the beginning. And it's at this point in the video, I'd like to point you to the late Michael Heiser's work. He's the one that made it most readily available to the average person. Please look into his work with regard to Mount Hermon. When quoting from Psalm 68, Paul asks a wonderful question. What does he ascended mean except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? The only one that would have done that would have been Christ. And if you're mistaken, John 6:38, for I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. This word will of him, which is the ratzon in the Hebrew language, please study that word out. So ask yourself, why did Yeshua transfigure on this very mountain where all of this is happening, right? That flag of declaration of war, and this is my territory. And why is it that it's all very relevant to the Mount Hermon example of the fallen angels? And why is it that in Psalm 22, you have this figure crying out about this, right? And these bulls of Bashan, they surround me. And we know that this is related to those whom were around Yeshua when he was on the stake and he was dying, right? It was at this moment that the evil ones thought they won, right? We've put to death the salvation plan of God. But the problem is as Paul said, if they had known, right, fully known the totality of the plan, they would not have crucified Christ, because that's the very thing that was their demise, right? I mean, they wouldn't have done that. But see, God concealed these things. And this is why it is important to now go back and test these things. This is why it's important to see that these passages don't fit David. And you can't say that they're hyperbolic. You don't get to just say, no, it's hyperbolic about David. Well, then if it's hyperbolic about David, that's fine. Cool story, bro. But what if it's literal about Yeshua? You don't get to say that the hyperbolic language is about David, but the literal fulfillment with it being about Christ is wrong. Well, how do you know that these bulls of Bashan, or the Bashan in general, is related to the leaders? Right here, it tells you in Ezekiel 39. Where the Lord assembles, right, and he wins this war. So even further, you have in cognate languages that this Bashan means like a dragon or a snake, which is so funny because you have that all throughout history, like Ugaritic, Akkadian, things of that nature. And this is all things that scholarly people find, but if you're not so scholarly, you may not find this. Or if you don't really care about history and what people believed in the past, which unfortunately is very much modern day Judaism today. 1 Peter 5 tells us that the devil is like a lion seeking to destroy. Interesting, Psalm 22 mentions that. And some will say, Le David Mizmor is about David. It tells you, but there's passages in Psalms where it's Le David Mizmor, Mizmor Le David, and yet they don't say those are about David.